So welcome everyone to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course. Let's bow in together. Thank you and welcome. I'm muting everybody here. We'll unmute for Q&A. Or for discussion. So we are working our way through the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma. For those who are new, I'll just say this is a collection of teachings. Every year, for about 15 years, Trungpa Rinpoche, my teacher and teacher of a number of the people here, he passed in 1987. But every year for about 15 years, he would take a group of anywhere from 150 to 250 students away for 3 months for a program that was called the Vajradhatu Seminary. And that was a program of both study and practice. And during those periods, he gave many talks. And the teachings in Tibetan Buddhism are divided into 3 categories. The Hinayana, that means the lesser vehicle, or as he preferred to call it, the foundational vehicle. The Mahayana, or the greater vehicle. And the Vajrayana, or the indestructible or adamantine vehicle. And the teachings were organized, each seminary, into those 3 vehicles. So for the first period of time, he would teach the Hinayana, and then for a period of weeks, the Mahayana, and then conclude with the Vajrayana. The Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma is a editing and a digesting and an editing of those talks. So they're all digested into these 3 volumes, Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. And we are working our way through the first volume, the so-called Hinayana volume, which is actually called the Path of Liberation. Because in this level of the path, one discovers egolessness. That's the sort of the ultimate achievement of this path. The idea that what we call an I is just a fiction or even a lie, doesn't exist, has no true being, and in fact is the source of suffering. And so it's called the path of liberation. We're liberated from belief in an I. And this, the second accomplishment of this path, is that one ceases to do harm because one is no longer selfish. One knows one's actions are no longer organized around the survival and benefit of I. Tonight we're studying chapters 29 and 30. And these are the first 2 chapters on the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. By the way, this might amuse you that the title of this 3-volume work, The Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma, is kind of a pun because Trungpa Rinpoche's name means his refuge name, the name he got when he took the refuge vows, which is the first vow you ever take as a Buddhist. And you get a name, and his name is Ocean of Dharma. So this is the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma, as it was named by the editor and editors. These 4 foundations of mindfulness are an ancient teaching. And you see, when Buddhism developed in India, it left India starting in about the 3rd century BC and traveled to other countries. The first place it went was Southeast Asia via Ceylon in about the 3rd century BC. At about the time of Christ, Buddhism arrived in China. And from China, it went to Korea and Japan in the 7th centuries. In the 8th century, it went from India to Tibet. And since then, it has migrated to other countries as well, including the West in the 19th century. One of the earliest teachings, the teachings that went to Southeast Asia are really the earliest teachings. They're called the Theravada. After the Buddha died, the Sangha couldn't agree on what he had actually taught and said, so they split up into different schools, they were called, 18 supposedly. And the period right after his death for about 2 centuries is called the period of the 18 schools. The school that went to Southeast Asia was called the School of the Elders, the Theravada. And in Pali, where it went first to Ceylon, and that Theravada, which is Sanskrit, was translated into Theravada. And Theravada Buddhism dominates Southeast Asia. It's spread from Ceylon to Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia. It's in Vietnam, but Vietnam is also dominated by Mahayana Buddhism that came down from China. And Theravada Buddhism is really the Buddhism of the so-called Hinayana. It's the collection of teachings, and one of these teachings is the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. And these have to do with how one becomes mindful of one's life. And in the traditional presentation, they are the mindfulness of body, the mindfulness of feelings, what you're feeling in your body and in your mind, the mindfulness of mind itself, which is awareness, that's the third one, and the mindfulness of mental contents or mental events. These are the traditional four foundations of mindfulness. Trungpa Rinpoche presents a different scenario or scheme for the four foundations. And I'm not sure where this comes from. My guess is that it comes out of the Mahamudra or Dzogchen traditions, which are advanced tantric traditions, because these teachings are much more advanced than the traditional four foundations of mindfulness, of body, feeling, mind, and mental contents. And these are called the foundations of, the first one is of body still. The second foundation is of life, and we're going to talk about these two tonight, I think. And the third is the foundation of effort. And finally, the fourth is the foundation of mind. And theoretically, we're going to cover those next week, the last two. Now, these teachings, the foundation of mindfulness is, of course, is a translation of the Sanskrit word shamatha. Shamatha has to do with coming back from dream into the present moment. That's the basic practice of shamatha. It's mindfulness practice, usually translated as mindfulness. It's the practice that is taught often in hospitals to patients to help them be calmer. It's taught in businesses. It's taught in lots of places. It involves one-pointed focus on an object. And the virtues of shamatha practice, of mindfulness practice, are threefold. The first virtue is that you become aware of the extent to which you spend your life lost in thought. Because until you begin to try to come back to the present, you become coming back using whatever, an object of awareness like the breath or like a mantra. And you come back to awareness of that from the dreams that inhabit our minds, the dreams of the past and the future. Until you make that effort, you really don't realize the extent to which one spends one's life lost in thought, lost in dreams of the past and the future. So that's the first benefit of shamatha, is beginning to see your mind more accurately. The second benefit is that you get some peace, because the dreams of the past and the future that inhabit our minds are fraught with anxiety. They're all about what we want to have happen in the future or what we don't want to have happen in the future. Even the thoughts about the past, as Fritz Perls, the famous Gestalt therapist, once said, are really dreams about the future. Because we think about the past in terms of what we liked about it and we'd like to have happen in the future, or what we didn't like about it and what we want to avoid in the future. And so these thoughts are fraught with tension, fear, hope, unhappiness, because they always contain the presupposition that things are not as they should be, and we want them to be different. That desire for things to be otherwise than they actually are is the main source of suffering. And so the second virtue of this practice is that you get a rest from that, because you come back into awareness of an object of the present moment. And in doing that, you cut through the dreams of the past and the future. And there's just this awareness of the present. I know one teacher who said it's like having a really good nap. It's kind of funny. The third virtue is that you begin to develop a habit, a muscle, as it were, just like if you went to the gym and you're lifting weights and you could build up your muscles. This muscle is the muscle of the ability to recognize, first of all, that you're dreaming. And the second virtue is that having done that, you can come back to the present. I mean, don't you know? I mean, isn't it true that when we're dreaming, we don't even know it? We're so lost in the dream. So the virtue of shamatha is that it trains us to realize that we're dreaming, and then we have an option. The option to continue the dream if we want to really do that, because sometimes dreams are really entertaining. Or it's like watching a television show, sort of a crude version of that. Or we can come back to rest in awareness of this present moment. And we do that with shamatha practice by using an object to bring us back. And the object that's most commonly used in the Buddhist world is the breath, because the breath only occurs in the present moment. So whenever you become aware of that, you are back in the present. Another one that's used a lot is mantra, especially in the Hindu tradition. And in fact, this practice of shamatha is called by Buddhists the common practice, because you find this practice taught in the Hindu tradition as well, in yoga studios, and TM, Transcendental Meditation, is both of them being Hindu, teach basically shamatha. The second aspect of meditation that's taught in Buddhism is called Vipassana, or in the Sanskrit. And that translates as variously as awareness practice. And there's a lot of talk about awareness practice. And awareness means that having come back to the present, you can have an awareness of everything that's going on right now. Me speaking, unless you drift off into dream, your environment around you, the cars going by on the street, if there are any, whatever it might be. You're aware of what is called the six knowables. And these are objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, bodily sensations, and objects of mind, which are mental events of all kinds, thoughts and emotions, but even just flickers of mind and all kinds of things that arise in your mind. And these six knowables are continually arising in the present. So Vipassana involves shamatha, because you have to come back to the present, out of dream, and then you have this wide awareness of whatever of the six knowables are arising and passing in this present moment. And they are all arising, and as they arise, they are passing. I mean, you may think that this computer endures over time, but in fact, your experience of it is momentary. You turn your head and you're not aware of it, and you turn your head back and there it is. And as it comes back, that awareness of it is dying as it appears. Just like these words that come out of my mouth. They're appearing and they die as they appear. So does sights. All of the six knowables are constantly arising in the present moment and passing. So that becomes part of the second, third, and fourth foundations of mindfulness. It's there in sort of a primitive form in the second, and we're going to talk about that tonight. And it's there in a more developed form, this awareness practice, this awareness of mind, in the third and fourth foundations. All of these practices have in common that you are coming back to awareness, and it is relaxed. It is effortless, because it's something we already have. The effort to come back might take a little effort, but once you're back, it only will obscure it. The more effortless and relaxed you are, the more natural and clear your awareness will be. And so, because it involves the giving up of effort and utter relaxation, it is very, very healthy for your mind to come back to this and rest in this. Now, so these practices, these four foundations, are basically stages in the practice of meditation. The first one is very much shamatha, mindfulness practice, awareness of an object, and the object really is one's body. But the sense of body is not just this body, it's the bodiness of the whole world. It's the physicality of this desk, of that picture behind me, of the screen, and of everything that is physical in this world. So you are coming back to the physicality of the world, which is very, very relaxed. It's already here. It's not doing much. It's just being. And you're coming back to that beingness in this first foundation. The way you do this is by paying attention in your meditation practice to your breathing and to your walking. You are aware of bodily sensations that arise. You might become conscious of the feeling of your bottom on the cushion, a pain in your knee, an itch on your head, whatever it might be. And all of these are becoming aware of your body through the physical sensations of the body. And also through the sense consciousnesses, these sounds, what appears to your vision. There are smells in your room, which probably not right now, but somebody might be cooking dinner in the next room and you can smell it. All of these things are the awareness of the body meaning not just my body, but the physical presence of the world, as opposed to awareness of thoughts and other aspects that we're going to get into. You might experience what we call the watching, but that wears out. The watcher is the voice or the person. I think of him as a kind of a parrot sitting on my shoulder, and he's wearing a Keystone Cops hat in my imagination. And he's saying, "Ah, that's good. Ah, that's bad. Ah, don't do that. Ah, that was a good one you just had," And he's making these comments. We call him the watcher. Trungpa Rinpoche used to call him the hitchhiker, that voice. It's always there making comments. Well, that voice can go away. And as it goes away momentarily, and then for longer periods of time, your awareness becomes very open, calm, clear, and precise. Because the watcher is a great distraction. I love the name hitchhiker for the watcher because it's like you've got this extraneous, unnecessary rider sitting on your shoulder making all these comments about your life while you live it. So what we're doing is we're paying attention to the breathing and to walking in walking meditation, to bodily sensations, the information of our sense consciousnesses. And the technique for doing this is identification with the breathing. And identification means you actually become the breath as it goes out into space and dissolves. Becoming the breath might mean that the watcher has disappeared. There are no longer two of you. When the watcher is present, there are two. There's the person who's actually going out with the breath. There's the breath going out. And then there's this commentator. But when the watcher shuts up, the hitchhiker disappears, then there is just whatever is happening. The breath going out into space and dissolving. It's very relaxed. Now, in doing this, we become much more aware of our body. Because oftentimes we're just walking along, we're lost in thoughts, and we're completely unaware of our body. We can make all kinds of mistakes. Step off a curb into traffic and suddenly a horn goes off, wakes you up. You can stub your toe. You can bump into somebody because you were so lost in a dream somewhere. So when we begin to come back from that to awareness, we become much more aware of our body. And really this points out that there are sort of two ways that we're aware of our body. What he calls in this reading the psychosomatic body, the conceptual psychosomatic body, or the body. And that's because we all have ideas about our body. I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm not handsome, I'm not beautiful, I'm ugly, I am handsome, I am beautiful. All of these concepts that we have about the body, about what it should and shouldn't be, evaluative concepts, create a conceptual body so that we don't actually experience what this body really is, this human body. But the more we begin to practice and come back into the present moment, cutting through the dreams of the past and the future, expanding ultimately our awareness, the more we become aware of the true body, what in Tantra is called the body. And in there lies some magic, which we'll come to. The way in which you come to this is that you, in the course of your meditation practice, you will have flashes of what is often called the essential nature of mind. There are many words for this in the Tibetan and in the Sanskrit. And what it really means is that we come back from thought and we experience this lucid clarity that is effortless to experience, has to be, and that is utterly clear and free of thought, of any kind of thought about the past and the future, any kind of ambition, any kind of criticism, anything. It's utterly clear, lucid, pellucid, meaning vivid, luminous, and we'll come to that in a little bit. So the idea of mindfulness here is simply being precise about what it is you're experiencing. And that precision, that clarity comes in flashes. It can come in a variety of ways. One way is that it just comes in a flash. Lots of people have experiences of this, of the world suddenly opening up, clearing into a stunning or a startling clarity. Another way is that a teacher can communicate this to you. And another way is that you can experience it through meditation. Now, we don't concretize this practice. We don't make it into something incredibly profound and holy. We just do it. And in fact, in the Kagyu tradition, they talk about what's called in the Sanskrit Kusulu Practice. And that Trungpa Rinpoche translated as Transcendental Pig Practice. And that's the way we practice. We're like transcendental pigs. We just eat, shit, sleep, and meditate when you're in retreat. When you're at home, you have this period of time when you sit and you meditate and you just watch the breath like a stupid pig doing one thing at a time. You just watch the breath going out. Actually, pigs are kind of smart as far as animals go, but they have that reputation. And there's it's very simple, this practice. It's utterly simple. We can do it. And in fact, there's a story that he recounts in this chapter. It's a famous story about the Buddha who had a student who was so stupid that he couldn't understand the teachings. And he couldn't understand the instructions about how to practice meditation. So the teacher gave him a broom and told him to sweep the meditation hall and sweep everywhere. And as he swept, to say, sweeping, 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 like that. Well, this fellow was so dumb, he couldn't remember to say sweeping. So he came back to the Buddha and said, what was that I was supposed to do? And the Buddha told him again, sweeping, sweeping. And he finally got it. And he went around sweeping everything and saying, sweeping, sweeping. The guy got enlightened. So we might be able to do it too, unless we're too smart. I'm just going through my notes here, so bear with me. Yeah, and he said, Trungpa Rinpoche says, he didn't have to remember lifting the broom up and down. He just felt it. And we can do the same thing with our breath. We don't have to remember the instructions. You just feel it. Now, mindfulness through walking meditation, that's a good one. You're using your body as an object of awareness the same way you use the breath. And you're using your legs to stir space as you would an oar to stir water. So the next time you do walking meditation, you are aware of the space and you're aware of your legs as they move through it. They're kind of stirring the space like an oar stirring water, going like this. And this, again, you see what you're doing with this is you're bringing your mind in a relaxed, effortless way back to the present. Now, you might say there's some effort involved. Well, the only effort involved is in that moment when you say, oh, I'm dreaming and I'm going to come back, and you come back. When you come back, just, we're here. It's effortless. And then the effort, when it comes back in, obscures that. It's like an overlay. Oh, I should be doing this. I'm going to try to do that. And it overlays this very natural, easy awareness. This is the mindfulness of body, of our bodies. We include sensations as reminders. So you might have an itch on your face, and that becomes part of your awareness of the body. It's not a distraction in this practice. You might have a pain in your knee, and that's not a distraction either. It's part of your awareness of your body. Now, if you have pains in your knee, we're not martyrs here. You might experiment with it and see if it's psychological and endure it for a little bit, but don't torture yourself. You move, but you're aware of that pain and of the movement and of the release from the pain. And it's very natural and easy. It requires no comment, although we might make a comment, but you can let that comment go and just rest in that awareness. Then he goes into a thing about the ox herding pictures, which I'll let you read. You can enjoy it. If you want to see the ox herding pictures, I'm sure you can Google them online. We had a publication that we made in the first years of Trungpa Rinpoche's arrival in America called Garuda. And he put the ox herding pictures in there with commentary. And then he gives a commentary here, but I'm just not going to go through it. I don't think it's all that helpful here. But it has to do really with the same thing, which is coming into the confidence of awareness. You see, it's the lack of confidence that disrupts our awareness, because we say, oh, am I doing it right? I don't know if I am. Oh, maybe, it says it looks like this. And so the lack of confidence disturbs our awareness. And the more confident we become, this is a confidence that's not like, look at me, I'm great. That kind of confidence is a lack of confidence. There you're trying to puff yourself up to make yourself feel good. The true confidence is the confidence that's completely silent. It's like when you walk up a flight of stairs, you're not saying, yeah, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, because you know you can, or whatever it might be. Some of us have trouble walking up flights of stairs. But it's this silent confidence that we're talking about. And when you have that, you can rest in awareness. Just here. It's silent. And it's clear. And it contains absolutely anything and everything, including these words. So at first, you're watching yourself do this because you can, this is a new practice perhaps for you, if it is. And the more confident you become, the more you begin to relax and you feel like you can let go of that watcher who's judging and just be here and do it. Work with the breath. We go out with the breath. We feel the breath rising. It exits through the nostrils or the lips, most commonly the nostrils, and you feel it as it leaves. And that feeling only happens in the present. And then the breath, you visualize the breath going out into the space, dissolving. It goes out, dissolves, and we're right here, looking at each other in a computer screen. So he says here, altogether, the idea of meditation is not to create states of ecstasy or absorption. That's a myth. That's actually part of a different kind of practices, and it's a false track. It's a dead end. And we can go into that another time, why it's a dead end and how it happens. And it's possible to do that, to achieve states of ecstasy and trance, but it's not recommended. But rather what it is the experience of being, of our being. We're already being. And so we just relax into that clear experience of being. Our problem is that up to now, we have never really experienced such a feeling of being. We've been so lost in thoughts about what we should be, what we don't want to be, what we do want to be, what we want to have happen in the future, what we wish hadn't happened in the past, what we wish had not only happened in the past, but which we could recreate in the future. We're just lost in that, and we have very little sense of our own being in the present moment. So this practice, this meditation practice of relaxing with yourself here and now, is really a practice of treating yourself well. Why? Because when we are in thought, we are constantly critical of ourselves, critical of our states of being, feeling that we need to improve them, make them better. That's the very definition of ego and confusion. And this practice of coming present is the utter act of treating oneself well, that this is good right now, wholesome. He says, when you do this practice, there is a feeling that you have done something. That's the confidence. And that feeling is important, a feeling that your meditation has a flat bottom. And what he means by that is that we're actually here, right now, nowhere to go. You don't have to make it better. You don't have to go to some better state of being. You're flat on your bottom, right here. And your thoughts have flat bottoms. So finally, he says that quality of solidity that we begin to get, the solidity of being fully present in this body, in the body of the physicality and the presence of this world, is the starting point of the mindfulness of body. Without this particular foundation, the practice of meditation could be very airy-fairy, back and forth, trying this and trying that. You become an eternal hitchhiker, constantly saying this is good, that's bad. So the technique of the first foundation of mindfulness is based on solidity and on finding a home ground. And that home ground is this present moment. All right. I think we've got time to do this second chapter. I wasn't sure if we would, which is called Mindfulness of Life. And in this chapter, you're beginning to appreciate the details of what goes on in your own body, speech, and mind. These are the three possibilities: body, which is the physicality of the world; speech, which is literally your speech, but it's also the meaningfulness of this world, meanings that are communicated; and mind is the perceptive aspect, that all of this can be known. He says, now this one is beginning to get towards Vipassana, awareness practice. And we'll see how in a minute here. The technique that is emphasized, or the aspect of technique, let's say, is what is called touch and go. And this is actually very profound. What it means is this: you're dreaming, you're dreaming, you're dreaming. Suddenly you realize you're dreaming and you come back. At that moment, that's the touch. And at that same moment that you come back to awareness, you let go of self-consciousness. It's just here. They happen simultaneously. Awareness and letting go of the voice that is saying, do this, don't do that, that's good, that's bad. You let go of that. That's the letting go. So you come back to awareness and you've already let go. They happen together. So it's very important to understand that it's the lack of ambition, the lack of the effort that's contained in ambition to be better that is involved in this coming back to the present moment. We are relaxing into this awareness that we're all experiencing right now. He says touch and go happens simultaneously and constantly, rather than touch being one thing and go being another. Touch and go come together always. Actually, everything is touching and going simultaneously. These words, as they come out of my mouth, as you hear them, they are leaving. This gesture, as it's made, it's already gone. Everything that you experience in this present moment is leaving as it arrives. In fact, they call this present moment, they call it, in Sanskrit, it's called the dhatu, which means space. And this space is both a womb and a charnel ground. Now, a charnel ground in India was a place that they threw dead bodies for people who couldn't afford to be cremated. And they would throw them out in the charnel ground to let animals come and eat them. So it's basically a graveyard, except they aren't buried. And this space is both a womb, everything is arising out of it in the moment, and it's a charnel ground into which everything is disappearing in the moment. So this simultaneity of arising and passing away. Then he talks about the name for this second mindfulness is actually tsowa in Tibetan, which means awareness of being, survival. That we can, we all have a survival instinct, right? We don't want to die, we want to live. But this survival is really fundamental, that as we come back into the present moment, we are coming back to our survival as it's happening right now. Every time we go off into thought, it's a kind of mini death. We're thinking that our life is in the future or was in the past, and we're not here. Somebody might call your name, and if you're really absorbed in thought, you might not even hear it. How many times have we all experienced that? So going off into dream, into thought, is a kind of death. And coming back to awareness is the real meaning of survival. This is where we survive. This is where we live our lives. And he says that the more we begin to realize this, the more we begin to take pleasure in coming back, because this present moment is so rich. It's so full of color and sound and smell and taste and all of that, the six nobles. It's beautiful, it's vivid. And at this point, meditation, so-called, might begin to become the central focus of your life. Both the practice on the cushion, which is kind of a lab experience, it's like going into the lab and mixing chemicals, and then you do it in daily life. As you walk down the street, as you talk to your friend, as you go to bed at night, you come back. And what you're coming back to is life, out of dream, out of a form of mini death. So he says, it is more than just practice. It is part of the instinct of life. Mindfulness brings clarity, skill, and intelligence. We become much more sensitive to the world. And in fact, your powers of intuition and even of premonition begin to develop very quickly when you begin to come back into the present moment more. Because it's like you're talking to somebody and you're lost in thoughts about them or what the environment is about, and you don't really read them. But when you come back and you become sensitive to that person's face, to the tone of their words, to the gestures that they're making with their body, suddenly you get a flood of information that's intuitive, you might say, about beyond words, about who and what this person is, what their intention is, what they're thinking. They might be saying they love you and have animosity towards you. They might be expressing anger and animosity, and really there's love behind there. Who knows what? All kinds of things. So in the second foundation, this one, the mindfulness of life, there is a love of mindfulness that develops. And at this point, the practice of meditation really begins to become the central focus of your life. Even when you forget And you're not doing it as you walk down the street. When you remember, it's a coming back to life out of dream. And one begins to realize that these dreams, these thoughts, while they may seem important, are very arbitrary. They're the person who's going along next to you and experiencing the same things as you might be having totally different dreams and thoughts, and probably is. So your experience of survival, as it were, takes place every moment. And this kind of mindfulness is really strength. You're rooted in this moment. You're very strong when you're that way. There's no hope and fear. There's no absent-mindedness. There's presence. He says, this is a warning now, he says, whenever we sit and meditate, our tendency is to have an attitude of renunciation or austerity. Like, now I'm going to do something good for myself, and it's going to be very boring and tedious, but I'll watch the timer and I'll sit here for 30 minutes and then I'll be a good person. And he says that attitude is a problem. It's devoid of life. And it is. It's all about becoming some abstraction. The mindfulness of life is the opposite of that. We're not trying to get away from somewhere to somewhere else. It's the essence of being here and now, and it brings enormous strength, energy, and power. And you don't hang on to it, you just touch it and you go, and you're going as you see it. That's so important about awareness, that you aren't trying to hold on to it. If you try to hold on to it, it turns into dream instantly. But you just let it go, and it's just here, it's clear, it's lucid, effortless. Finally, there's the idea of well-being, that you develop reverence and respect for this world, and you begin to be able to experience magic, he says, majesty, beauty, and well-being. This is based on coming present into what you are and what you have in your world. It's not dependent on conditions, but on simple awareness, this magic. And this is the well-being of body, speech, and mind. There is an experience that meditators often have, depending on the circumstance, where they begin to tune in to the extraordinary vividness of this world when it's seen stripped of thoughts of the past and the future, of ambition, of neurosis, when it's seen in this relaxed clarity, that it emerges very, very vividly, very colorfully, with huge lucidity. This experience can happen in a variety of ways. It can come through your meditation practice. Yeah. It can just come in a flash. Something can trigger it, and suddenly you're seeing something very clearly. I know people who talk about walking down a staircase and suddenly the sun was coming through a window and they saw the motes of dust and their vision just cleared. And there was this moment of terrific lucidity. It can happen at the hands of a teacher who is skilled and can point it out to the student. And that requires a very intimate and trusting relationship between teacher and student. And it happens a lot. There's a practice that we're not doing now because of COVID. But in our Sangha, we used to do this practice of going away for group meditation for a period of time. And you can go away for a week, you can go away for 2 weeks. There's a practice called Datun. Datun means, literally in Tibetan, Da is month and Tun is period. So it's a month-long period. And we would go away for Datuns. And they'd be organized into weeks. Some people would only come for a week or two, and other people would come for the whole Datun. And you would get maybe, anywhere from 25 to 100 or 150 people showing up for a Datun at Rocky Mountain Dharma Center in Colorado, or Karme Chuling in Vermont, and other places up in Nova Scotia, where we had centers. And people would come and they'd live there, and every day you get up in the morning and you start practicing at 6:30, and you practice maybe 6:30 to 7, and then at 7, there's a break and there's a breakfast, 7 to 8, and then you come back and you practice till lunchtime, and there are breaks, alternate periods of sitting and walking meditation, occasional talk. Maybe there's a yoga period for those who wish to do yoga. It's not inhumane. And the periods of meditation and walking vary in length. And then there's a lunch period and there's a work period afterwards. And then you come back and you're sitting till dinner time, and there are chants and there's dinner, and the dinner is always served and eaten in a ritual style. It comes from the Zen tradition. In fact, this whole practice comes from the Zen tradition, where it's called Sesshin. And Rinpoche loved it. He went to Tassajara, the Zen mountain center in the Carmel Valley, and saw them doing Sesshin, and he invented Datan. Datan doesn't exist in the Tibetan tradition. It's a copy of Sesshin with modifications. And then in the evening, there's more sitting, and you generally end, we always end at around 8:45, and then people go to bed. And oftentimes these practices were done in silence, and there was no talking, and went on for days. Maybe there would be talking, functional talking, although a friend of mine once said, if you allow functional talking, meaning pass the salt, you're stepping on my toe, that kind of thing. He said, if you have silence, you get functional talking. And if you have functional talking, you get rampant gossip. So we used to run them mostly in silence. Now there's a thing that happens in Datan for people who are doing the whole thing. They start, and somewhere around 10 days in, and the leader of the Datan meets with the meditation instructors, because if you've got maybe 60 people, you probably have at least 6 meditation instructors, one for every 10 people. And those people will meet with their meditation instructors periodically throughout the week, every 2 or 3 days, to talk about what's going on, their practice. But at the beginning of the Datan leader will meet with the meditation instructors and give them instructions. And here's one of the instructions they've given, which is usually around 10 to 15 days in. People will start complaining or observing that their visual sense is heightened, that they are seeing colors much more brightly, and that their auditory sense, all their senses are heightened in one way or another. It varies from individual to individual. And that things are becoming very, very vivid. And not only that, but they're having trouble sleeping at night because this vividness is playing back and keeping them awake. And the Datan leader will instruct the meditation instructors, don't worry about this, just keep them, calm them down if they're excited, and tell them that it will go away. And it does. It doesn't go away so much the vividness, but the insomnia generally disappears after a few days. This vividness is what he's talking about here in the well-being, in this foundation of mind, that we begin to experience this in our practice in little and bigger ways, depending on the individual and depending on how much they're practicing, that this begins to come through. So he talks about breathing perception technique, rediscovering the sense perceptions. He says you begin to discover an entirely new world, and that world is extraordinarily beautiful, colorful, bright, and loud. That vividness, you see, in the first blush, when you first begin to experience it, well, it's very discontinuous with your previous experience. So it's very noticeable. And a little bit shocking it can be, depending on how strong it is. Eventually, you become used to it, like anything else, and it becomes secondary. But in the beginning, he says, you begin to discover an entirely new world, and that world is extraordinarily beautiful and colorful, bright and loud. And in fact, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's all this gorgeous, very, very colorful iconography, like that guy behind me there on the wall, that tanka of, his name is Yamantaka. I won't go into that. And that vividness and colorfulness of the Vajrayana Buddhism is because as a person progresses on the path, the world becomes brighter. And this is really trying to capture that brightness and vividness. It's extraordinarily beautiful. He says you find that you are completely bombarded with all sorts of sense perceptions. Your sense consciousnesses become highly sharpened. Those experiences happen in the midst of nowhere. They're not something you cultivate, they just come. And he says it's not like a drug experience, because drug experiences like LSD and psychedelics produce something like that. But those things are artificial, and they're not nearly as beautiful as the naturalness of what comes to you through your meditation practice. And not only that, but they tend to numb you out and make you feel ill and all kinds of neurotic things. And this awareness of the sense perceptions happens at the same time as your awareness of breathing. You're sitting there breathing, and there's an awareness of the totality of the experience, this room. Breath is going out into the space. Your awareness is here in the room, especially as you begin to practice Vipassana, when your awareness expands and fills the room. And the breath is like a highlight going out. We talk about 75, 25. 75% of your awareness here in the space, 25% on the breath as it goes out. He says, if your effort is a mere suggestion, 25% effort, then a lot of possibilities arise around you. Outbreathing is a way of communicating to the sense perceptions. It is like extending your tentacles. And breathing in is allowing room for this space to be. You go out, you extend your tentacles, as it were. You are here in this world. You sense the color and the shape and the sound and all those 6 knowables. And then there's this space. As you breathe in, the sense of space. You need a light touch to do this. Yeah. You begin to feel the effect of this clarity. It's not hard-edged. It's not hard, effort. And the whole thing coordinates together. It's like you're aware of the breathing going out, but you're also aware of the sense data, sights, sounds, if there are any, your sensations, maybe your bottom on the cushion. Probably no smells or tastes in your meditation room, but who knows? And mental events as they come. And these 6 things arise effortlessly, and you're working with the breath goes out, and all of these things are happening, and you're aware of them at the same time, simultaneously. This is the mindfulness of mind, the second one. Mindfulness of life, We're coming to mindfulness of mind. It's mindfulness of life because we're becoming more and more aware not of our own lives and of the way in which life arises in the sense data around us. And you do this with a very light touch. If you're too serious, meditation becomes an imprisonment for you rather than an expression of freedom. And that's what it should be, an expression of freedom. Too much seriousness becomes an obstacle. Meditation, he says, is already there. This can't be emphasized enough. The awareness that we're developing is already here. It's just that we cover it over with self-doubt, with lack of confidence, with feeling that we have to make things better, that they're not good enough. But every time we let that go, here we are, in this present moment, clear, resting, in space. It's so simple. It's amazing. We're becoming really ordinary people. And he once said, I remember in a talk, he said, the problem is you all want to be extraordinary. And he said, the Buddha wasn't an extraordinary person. He was utterly ordinary. And you'll take that to make me mean that he was extraordinary. And he was telling us the Buddha is an ordinary human being. And that's what our job is to become completely present, ordinary, here, easy, relaxed, without judgment, without good and bad. And you can appreciate this. He says there's lots of room for everything, including your own appreciation. So I think that's it for these 2 mindfulnesses. the mindfulness of life, which we've just covered, and the mindfulness of body, which was the first one, which is really mindfulness of body is like shamatha. We're coming back to the physicality of this world, the presence, and the mindfulness of life has to do with just utter relaxing into awareness and really coming to life. Yeah. So we could have discussion, and I'm hoping you can unmute yourselves when you want to speak. And I am hoping that Barry and Val and I don't know if Ellen is here. I think not, probably. And Ellen just had her second COVID vaccination, and I think she's probably hunkering down. So if you could help me find people who want to make a comment or ask a question. You can raise your hand either here or you can raise that little icon. Do it at the bottom of the screen. It's in reactions. Everybody's done.
Russell, did you have a question?
I do. I have a question, sort of slash comment, which is related to what's really been a great experience for me of trying to sit every morning and every night and have that consistency that I usually don't have. And I'm sort of taken aback because it's such a simple process. And John goes over it again and again, every morning, every night, a couple times. He says, you just come back to the breath, right? Rest in space. If you find yourself distracted, come back to the breath, go out with the out breath. And experientially, it's like very powerful and sort of healthy and sort of frightening because I don't have that discursive thing going for a little while. But when I think about it, I mean, I just feel like, okay, so I'm just not thinking or sort of not taking refuge in my thoughts as much. It seems very mundane and almost like mechanical, but the process is not the process, maybe the result. It really seems powerful. Because it's almost like yeah, quite powerful and you know, beginning to kind of relax a little bit and have a sense that I don't need to constantly surround myself with this discursive process and the sort of futility of it. And one day you're feeling one way and thinking one thing, and the next day or even the next hour, you get a phone call or you trip over a phone cord or whatever it might be. All of a sudden you feel different, your mood's different, you're thinking differently. It's just such a powerful kind of process, but at the same time, it seems very mundane, you know? I don't know, that's just.
Thank you, that's a great point. It is mundane, and it's very simple, and yet it has a cumulative effect. In the old analogy of water dripping on stone. When we do it regularly, regular and short is really be better than irregular and long. So however you can do it regularly, will have its cumulative effect, and you won't notice it at any given point in time, but suddenly you'll look at where you are now and you'll realize that things have changed. Maybe I have changed. It's like as Rinpoche used to say, just do it. It works. We study as well.
Yeah.
Study keys our intuition. It helps us see where we're going. It's not that we study in order to try and get to the place that's described, but it does open up possibilities, the study. And it speaks to our wisdom and our intuition so that we begin to recognize things as they develop in our practice and rest in them. So thank you, Russell.
That's just following up, just what you just said about just doing it. Like there's that there's that quality of just cutting it. And it's like, well, don't you have to have like a whole process or a kind of a justification or you know, I don't know. I find the whole thing sort of bizarre and sort of unnerving, and at the same time, kind of effective. And it's just sort of strange for me. I don't know.
I think you need all that just to get your butt down on the chair or the cushion, you know? And once you're there, all that stuff is unnecessary. It goes and you relax into awareness. I keep saying that word. It's used throughout the teachings more and more. The more advanced you get on the path, the more that word effortless, relaxation is emphasized. Because we're developing what is already there in us. The problem is we don't believe it. We think we have to do some object of self-improvement, and we're constantly trying to improve ourselves in one way or another, get richer, be loved more, get thinner, you know, who knows what. Get smarter, get more enlightened.
Yeah.
And that's what, yeah, that's the neurosis.
Come up with something. That's like the, you know, I got to come up with something, you know.
Come up with something. That's a good one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kurt.
Yeah, can you speak any more about the hitchhiker? You know, to me, it's I call him the commentator. It's just commenting on the whole process. You know, it's like, you know, how's the breath going? Wow, there was a moment there that you weren't thinking, and you know, no matter what, that voice is just constant. And is there any tips on quieting that in my case, the commentator down?
I'll bet when you're doing your art that there are more instances when that commentator leaves.
Right.
And there's just awareness. I mean, then it'll come back, but doing art.
Yeah, there's long moments. There's long moments.
Now, art is a wonderful way of coming out of the hitchhiker, out of the watcher. See, the hitchhiker, the watcher, these are other names for ego. In coaching, they call it the saboteur, the black beast.
Mm-hmm.
In psychoanalysis, it's called the false self. And what it is a voice that you've internalized. You think it's me, but it's not. It's stuff you've learned over the years about what's good and what's bad and what you should be avoiding and all of that stuff. You know, what you should love, what you should hate. And those voices, that voice that's inside you can be it's oftentimes actually a voice that belongs to a particular individual. It might be a powerful individual in your past, oftentimes a parent, but it can also be a compilation of different individuals, instead of an amalgam, you know, of them. And it's always judgmental, it's always critical, and we always think it's me. And in fact, that's its name, is me, I. But it's the hitchhiker. It comes from time to time. Meanwhile, the real Kurt Steger is living the life, you know, eating the food, sleeping at night, you know, putting on the clothes, all that stuff. And then the hitchhiker is saying, no, not that shirt. That'll make you look too skinny. Try this one, you know, make you look more substantial, whatever it's going to say, you know. And so the idea in meditation and in good psychoanalysis and in coaching is to help a person see their hitchhiker, their saboteur, their black beast, and then go around it. You can't do battle with it. If you do battle with it, you reinforce the fact that it's there. You give it life because you're affirming its existence by doing battle with it. So what you do is you say, that's bullshit. And you just leave and you do what you're going to do. You go make your art, or you go cook your breakfast, or you go talk with your friend, or whatever it might be. Sit down and meditate. Come
I
back.
find that, yeah, you're right. In life, I can forget about it. Sitting on the cushion, that's where that narration is constant. Even what you just said, that to go around it, not give it attention, there it pops back up. It's like, hey, you just did it. It's tricky. It's seductive at times. Like you say, it's judgmental, but then it's also very seductive when it's telling me I'm doing a great job, and it's another way of being there. And,
So that's why we just come back to the physical sensation and the awareness of the breath as it rises, the feeling as it leaves the nostrils. You're going out into the space, your awareness is here, dissolving into this space, and at the end, there's just this. And for any part of that, when the watcher isn't there, there's just pure awareness.
Hmm.
And then if you say, was I being aware? Who's that speaking? This is our path. But the problem thing is that the more you do the practice, the more you begin to relax and settle in, and you begin to become more at peace with yourself. The watcher is not at peace at all. And that's antithetical to what the hitchhiker, that voice is. I remember one time I was giving a talk years ago, and a woman came up afterwards, the way people do, when you're the speaker, and she waited her turn in line, and she got to me and she said, about 3 weeks, my saboteur, she was calling it the saboteur, almost got me. And what she meant was she almost committed suicide. That is the end goal of the saboteur, of the hitchhiker, of the watcher. It's completely self-destructive. And it's the ultimate evil in Buddhism. It's called self-attack, lack of self-confidence, self-hatred. It's the first sin from which all others spring. So the way to work with it is to come back to awareness of whatever it might be in the present moment. The breath is our task. And then in daily life, as you're walking down the street, to come back from dream and be here for your life.
Could I offer something here?
Yeah, go ahead, Barry, and then Meg.
Just briefly, I think relaxing is really important. To relax, because I know from my own experience, there's a strong tendency to kind of grapple with it. So there's a certain kind of relaxation.
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Meg, you had a comment?
Yeah, it is just a comment. It's sort of a shocking statement that you made, that the end result of the witness, the observer, whatever, is self-annihilation.
It's the ultimate self-hatred. That's the watcher's job. See, when it's trying to improve something, like saying, it would be better if you did this, it's saying you're already flawed. When you try to fix something, the implication is it's broken. That's why the watcher, the saboteur the saboteur is never making sort of neutral remarks. The watcher, it's always saying, this is good, that's bad. Robert.
It's funny because it sounds like Chinese water torture. It doesn't, a drop of water on a rock eventually would wear a hole in the rock. And what I never saw was that self-criticism that I had going on little by little was killing me. Everything that I wanted to do, it was killing that thing off. But it was a part of me that was dying with it. Which prompts me to ask the question, when you mentioned it's the lack of confidence that disturbs our awareness, is this akin to having a doubt? Yes?
Yes. 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 This is teaching. This isn't me speaking. The term for confidence, the real confidence, is ziji. Not a great word? Ziji. So it sounds confident, sounds full of zing, ziji. And what it means is this confidence that's completely so confident, it's silent. It doesn't have to say, I can do it. It's silent, relaxed.
The tricky thing about the doubt is it happens like, you know, it doesn't have to have words. It could have like, uh-oh, you know, it doesn't have to be words. It could be just a pulling back.
That's why these mindfulness practices are so important. You see, ultimately what's happening is that we're beginning to enter a different world. And that world is not only the world of lack of doubt, it's a different world sensually, where the senses are much more vivid and meaningful. And we're beginning to appreciate our intelligence, our intuitive intelligence, our ability to read the world in a way that we can't when we're lost in logical thought. We're beginning to we begin to appreciate that openness and the intuitive quality that it brings. And also premonitions. People begin to have premonitions about what's going to happen because they're seeing the flow of events. And that becomes very seductive. It seduces us out of neurosis, out of the watcher, and into awareness.
Is there a name for the extreme lucidity of thought that you mentioned? Is there a particular name for that attached to that?
Not lucidity of thought, it's lucidity of awareness. And yes, there's a name. In the more advanced teachings, which we will get to, especially in the Mahayana, it's two parts. Okay. The first part is the teaching of emptiness, shunyata. And what that refers to is the fact that everything we experience is so dynamic, so changing as we see it, that it has no true essence. You can't find the essence because as soon as you are aware of it, it's gone. It's changed into something else, like these words. That's the first aspect, emptiness. That's called lack of true being. There is no real being. Everything is like the constant presentation on your computer screen. The pixels are changing every instant, right? That's the way our life is. It's like we're living in an even more dynamic version of a computer screen. There aren't even pixels. It's just a constant flow of change. That's the shunyata aspect. And when that shunyata aspect is realized and when it's deeper, then what begins to happen is what they call the luminosity aspect. The word in Sanskrit is prabhasvara. In Tibetan, it's ursel. And it means that in this world where we've stopped concretizing everything and putting labels on it, then we begin to see the true vividness of life. And everything emerges luminous. That's the prabhasvara. Things are luminous. They're brilliantly colored in all the six notables. And not only are they colored and communicating their qualities to us, but they are informative. They're giving us information about what the world is and how to live in it that we have been ignoring. So these two aspects go together. We're jumping way into the future here with emptiness, shunyata, Sanskrit, tong ni in Tibetan. You might just think of the Sanskrit shunyata, and then its correlate, which comes later. Shunyata comes first on the path, is prabhasvara, luminosity, that the world becomes luminous. And it's the extreme communicativeness of the phenomenal world as it arises and passes in the moment. Only in the moment. It's the only place it lives. Okay? Peter, yeah.
Yes. John, is there any difference between the watcher and the ego?
I don't think so.
Isn't it all ego? Aren't they all ego?
Yes. I mean, the watcher always thinks that it exists. It says, I'll do this, I do that, I like this, I don't like that, I should do this, I shouldn't do that.
But the nature of the advice seems to be the same, though.
Yes.
Destructive. In other words, destructive, right?
It's, you know, when you study to be a psychotherapist or a coach, somebody who's helping people, if your training is good, they tell you your job isn't to fix somebody. Your job is to help that person find their true potential, you know, who they really are and what they want to, how they want to live. And the reason is, if you try to fix somebody, what you're telling them is you're broken. When we do that to ourselves, we try to fix ourselves, and we're telling ourselves, I'm broken.
Hopeless. Hopeless.
Huh?
Yeah.
It's painful. It's awful. It's sad.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Oh boy, it's so powerful though, that voice. It can be so seductive.
And that voice is always about self-improvement. And the flip side of self-improvement is, I'm busted. I'm lacking.
A failure, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I've had my share of it during my life, I want to say.
Tony has a question.
Who?
Tony.
Oh, Tony.
Hi, John. Hi, everyone. Great teaching. I remember listening to an interview with Phil Jackson a number of years ago, and the interviewer said to him, "You've been so successful coaching these teams. They've been unbeatable. What's your secret?" And he said, "I don't really have one." And she said, I think it was Terry Gross on Fresh Air. And she said, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "I just teach them how to work with their greatest enemy." And she said, "Well, who would that be?" And he said, "Themselves." So Phil Jackson hit it right on the nose. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Isn't he a Buddhist, I think? Do you remember that correctly?
Yeah, he's a Zen Buddhist, yeah.
That's right.
And so you say just to go around that voice?
You just come back to the technique.
Oh, okay.
You can't battle it. If you battle it, you give it life, you give it credibility, you give it...
Yes.
Yeah.
So whenever it is, wherever it is, you just go back to the practice.
Go back to awareness.
Just walk away. It takes two to tango, right?
Mm-hmm.
Steph, you had something?
Yeah, but before I get to it, I would like to say I like this idea of your greatest enemy being yourself, and the harder you press, the harder you push, the more ammunition you give to your... That's not a good way of putting it. It's like the Chinese puzzle that you stick your fingers in, and the harder you pull, the tighter it gets. That's kind of like pushing against practice, I think I'm getting. But the question I wanted to ask is, I see that the terms mindfulness and awareness are used separately. And to me, it seems that that's pretty close to the same thing. But I was wondering if you could elaborate on the way those two words are used in these teachings.
Okay. The mindfulness refers to the practice of shamatha. In Tibetan, it's called shinen. Both of them mean the same thing. They mean resting or abiding in peace. And the peace that you're abiding in is the freedom from the anxiety of thought. Because all thought is riddled with tension and anxiety. It's the wish that things were different. So, to a great extent or a little extent, that's the basic characteristic. So shamatha is about coming back out of thought. And when you come back out of thought, you're coming back to awareness in the present. And it's done in a very simple fashion. You become aware of something that is occurring only in the present. It's helpful if it's only in the present, like your breath. That sensation as it leaves your nostrils, that's only happening now. A sound, if you're practicing PM, whatever it might be, a mantra. Vipassana is built on that. You have to be doing shamatha in order to then be doing vipassana. You have to be in the present. But now in the present, instead of, you couldn't drive your car while you're practicing shamatha. You can't, focus on a sound or your breath and drive your car. You'd have a serious accident, right? Because you wouldn't be aware of what's going on around you. You'd be focused on that object. Vipassana is now, having practiced shamatha, coming back into the present, you broaden your awareness. Instead of being aware of this one thing, you're aware of the whole environment, space. Now, initially, here's a little secret. Initially, when you begin to practice vipassana and you have your awareness in the room, let's say, and we call it, sometimes it's called panoramic awareness. Well, you're sitting there, and basically what you're doing is you're concretizing the room. You're making it into another object, like your breath. Eventually, the more you do this, the more you realize that you don't have to concretize that room, that your awareness is wide and filling the room without you doing anything. And then the practice of shamatha becomes not coming back to an object like your awareness of this space. It becomes a matter of letting go into awareness of whatever is there. That's vipassana. But it's built on shamatha. You have to have shamatha in it. Vipassana changes everything. Not only can you drive your car better when you practice vipassana, but ultimately, because it lacks the watcher when you are practicing it, it lacks the ego, the world is changing. Your understanding of what this world is changing, and you're moving towards the understanding of shunyata, egoless, true egolessness, utter egolessness, lack of existence of anything, that we're living in the middle of a constantly changing matrix of phenomena.
We have another question, and we're also running out of time.
Maybe this will be the last question.
I think me. Yeah. I want to ask, is the critical attitude of the watcher the same as the cynicism? That's what I felt is part of the path. I think Rinpoche always talk about this word cynicism, and I felt there's a tinge of positive value to that, in that you see the other side, the flip side of things, and it sort of give you a different perspective, but it also is destructive at the same time. So I wonder if it is the same and if it has any value at all.
Well, let's put it this way. Until a person is fully enlightened, and that's really the end of the path, they still have a watcher. It just gets thinner and more subtle as you go along the path. And as the watcher becomes thinner and more subtle, less there, you might say, the other aspects of the world become brighter and stronger, like the vividness of the phenomena, like the meaningfulness of the way in which things present, like your intuition, like your understanding of when you look at something that you can actually feel it and understand it as art, perhaps, or as meaning. So that's growing exponentially as the watcher thins. But the watcher still hangs around. And that's why there are stages in the path. Those stages represent the continual and gradual disappearance of the watcher as it becomes more and more subtle, less and less obvious and present, until finally the practitioner realizes they don't need it at all. These are actually described at the level of the Mahayana path in stages. They're called the 10 stages, the 10 bhumis in Sanskrit. And each one of them has a virtue and a failing that it overcomes. And it all has to do with the thinning out of the watcher and the increase in wisdom, you might say, in awareness. And that wisdom is definitely described as it increases.
But do you think that cynical attitude is sort of unnecessary?
No, I don't think that. Especially in the beginning. A cynical attitude is very helpful when a person comes to the path, so that they're not going to swallow some panacea, hook, line, and sinker, and get sucked into some belief system. Cynicism is great. And I remember Trungpa Rinpoche saying, cynics make the best Buddhists. But then later he also said, ultimately, cynicism is a knife that cuts itself. You got to get rid of that too. Even that becomes something to hold on to and rely on. Yeah. Thank you, Shinyi. That was a great question. So we should end, everybody. It's past ending time, as always, but it's so great to talk about all this with you. And we could end with the dedication of merit, if you will. We're dedicating the benefit here that we've earned here to all sentient beings. And you might think, gee, I don't want to give that up. But the fact is that when you give that up, you're giving up your ego. And everybody wants to, you really want to do that. So here we'll do it. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. So see you all next week. And if anybody wants
Thank you so much.
about their practice, I'm available, Barry, Laura, and just contact us. And it's a great thing to do to talk about your meditation practice.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Uh-oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Morning.
You all.